I'm Laura Della Corte, and today we are here at the Edinburgh Film Festival with Heidi Levitt, the director of Walk With Me. Hi Heidi, how are you feeling today?
Hi Laura, I'm feeling great being at Edinburgh.
Fine. So I would like to start,
I said that again because I realize now that I'm in Edinburgh.
yeah, after the long journey, yeah. So actually, Heidi, for me was totally, heartwarming seeing the story that you are, describing, like the documentary with Walk With Me. That, for me, I don't feel like it's a documentary. Like, I'm sorry to say this, maybe it's...
No, I'm happy to hear that.
But it's more like, being a part of real life. That is something more intimate that to say is just a documentary. So, and
Let me talk about that for a second because
yeah.
I made the film. I come from a narrative background because I've been a casting director for 30 years. So when I think about storytelling, I think about it from the point of view of character and voice, and that's how I do my job. So when I thought about making the movie, I thought about us as characters. And the interesting thing is I didn't think about myself in the movie because I wasn't going to have me. I was really focused on Charlie, my husband. And then the surprise is that he was such a good leading man because I didn't see him as, he's not an actor. I've tried. He can't really act. But he lights up for the camera, and his warmth, his light comes through. So I always wanted to make the movie from a narrative point of view. And I'm glad that it came through to you that way because it's a story. And all movies, whether they're documentaries or whatever, a good movie is a story. And we're communicating it. And I love the idea that it had a lyricism to it because that's what I was going for. So I'm glad it resonated that way.
Yeah, and I can feel that you have this, a wiser way of seeing things after you have been in this field for a long time. And as you said, you have this extensive background in casting and also mentorship that is, by renowned director deeply influenced your approach as well. So. How actually did their lesson for you maybe shaped a little bit of the story that you want to tell with Charlie? You have been with Wim Wenders, Sally Potter, Wayne Wang, so like very, very big name.
Yes, thank you. I thought about kind of each scene that I was approaching, thinking a little bit about how would they do this? How would they cover it? The challenge for me was about using the camera to tell the story, not the character only. And I worked with Lisa Rinsler, who's a renowned cinematographer, and we had known each other many, many years ago, and I loved her approach visually, and she's very intimate, and she was sort of implanted in my family in a way. And she worked with Wim Wenders, so we shared that in common. We also shared my biggest artistic influence as a photographer is Robert Frank, who was a Swiss photographer who came to America and did the book The Americans, which was and it was like in the late 1950s, and it really changed the way we saw America. And Robert was originally from Zurich, which is where my mother's from, hence my name Heidi. And Robert very much took me on as a daughter in a way, very influential to me. I met him because he made a film called Candy Mountain, and his producer had called my casting office where I was an assistant, and they said, Robert Frank is making a movie. And I'm like, really? My bosses didn't really know who he was. I had studied him at college. I went to Barnard College, which is across the street from Columbia University, and I took a class at Columbia about the Beats and that whole era. And Robert was best friends with Kerouac. And anyways, I discovered The Americans before it had been reprinted. It was like this book in the Columbia Library that you had to have special permission. And I looked at that book and I just cried. And then I got to work with him. And I feel like he and Wim Wenders and a lot of these directors, they have this piece in common where they really know how to look at the soul, and they really know how to do it without pushing it to try, because it's sort of this instinctual way of looking at the world and looking at people and looking for what they want. And so when I'm casting sort of with those kinds of artists, my job as a casting director is to enrich their vision, sometimes by challenging it, but I also learn, like, who is that person going to respond to? How can I make that actor that I love feel right for the director sometimes? Because that is where the training comes in that I didn't realize I had until I did it. Because I'm a casting director, I have to know how to work with actors, talk to actors. I did, study acting a little bit, and I worked in the theater in New York. And my job is to invite the actor in for an audition. I want that actor to succeed. And if I can help them succeed for the director, so each director I know will sometimes approach it differently. And it's my job to sort of intuit the way that they would see it, in a way. And then sometimes, again, like I said, throw it the opposite direction to get the right result. And I can say multiple times how that's kind of worked, where I've been able to sort of help shape something. And that's really a rewarding part of my job, is if I can intuit the way that they're thinking and be able to bring something new to it. But the best directors observe and collaborate, right? They're grabbing ideas from the actor. I mean, I remember casting as an assistant Fatal Attraction, and we saw every actress under the planet came in. And the director, Adrian Lyne, who came from commercials, we would audition one person after another. Wait, no, he was Fatal Attraction. I was thinking about then Jacob's Ladder. Both of those movies, we saw he couldn't make a decision. And we would see tons. And I was an assistant, becoming an associate, becoming a casting director. And I remember, like, Fran McDormand came in and she started eating potato chips in the scene for something. And he took those ideas later, and maybe it was Glenn Close, but he kind of amalgamated everything that he had seen.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that that's what a director has to do, in a way, is, yes, you have your own vision, but it's informed by what you've seen, what you've read, what you feel. And actors particularly bring great ideas to directors.
Wow, this is so fascinating, actually, because being able to see a creature before it's born and, like you said, like, contribute to shape the form of what is going to be. Must be something very, like you said, rewarding, but I think even very tough, maybe, like.
Yeah, it's hard, and sometimes when you make a mistake, or what if it goes awry, but in a documentary, it's very different, right? Because documentary is about discovery so much, right? You have your subject, you have your issue and your story, but how is it going to unfold? And the beauty of the documentary is you're writing it as you're making it. And there's a lot of freedom to it. And there's lots of darlings that didn't make it into my movie. And that came in the editing with my editors and shaping what the story was. But in creating, for me, the important thing was creating this visual language, which I use a lot of nature, and I really was interested in the transcendentalists and, like, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thoreau and the way that they saw the world, because I was filming a lot in a beautiful place in Vermont, which is what we call our happy place. And it was about not having control. We can't control nature. We haven't been able to control this disease. We haven't been able to stop it. So how do I live through it? So there's that element that's running through. And then the other thing is, like, how can I portray these people in my life that are personal and be as specific as possible, but we're representing everybody else, because I am just one of 55 million other families out there who are dealing with this. And I think the most powerful stories are the most personal, but because they have the universal. So as I was trying to make sure that I'm portraying something that's true, and also creating not an archetypal father, son, daughter, but they need to also represent in a way, and they need to come up with who is that person, where are they like. And have a family of artists, and I also wanted the struggle as we were going through this was to allow them this to be themselves and not take away from it or add to it too much, but to be truthful. But then also, as a mother, this is really hard, because to make your children vulnerable like that was probably the hardest thing.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'm still fighting that story of like, I don't want to manipulate my kids. And the best directors I've worked with have manipulated me to get their vision, and probably everybody around them. And that's where I feel like it's really hard for me, because I'm an enabler more than a manipulator, I think. But I feel that to make a great movie, I had to discover my voice and then own it and say, okay, I'm doing this because I need to use this to cope and to find my own artistry. I've always stood behind everyone. So I think admitting that to my family, saying, I've done everything for you, and I know maybe this is selfish, but I need to do this. And having to admit that you need that, I think, is a big thing for any artist, particularly as a woman and as a mother. Yeah. Motherhood is very central to me.
Especially, I think, while you were talking, there are some images of Walk With Me that, come to my mind. That one of them is when I see you, how much effort did you put in trying, to find answers when you discovered how Charlie, is gonna feel in the future. And I think you were even more involved at the very beginning than Charlie himself. Let me say that I don't know that. This is what I felt like seeing the very first images of Walk With Me. And later on, when you say that, actually it's important also to create a community, talk to the doctors, also understand when they are not able to help you, so move forward and find another one, and talk about Alzheimer and, all these. I think that even when you get older, it's like kind of taboo of talking about what is going to happen, because, I think society, even more than like the past 10 years, I think we are scared of getting old, of, losing our mind, our capacity, and we don't talk about it. It's like you said, also during the film, friends of Charlie said, but Charlie seems to be normal, like they don't see what is
happening.
Yeah. So I would like to ask you how it felt for you, because it was for me very sometimes hard to see how much effort did you put, and sometimes not being understood on the moment later on. But later.
I think so. I am a seeker and a digger and a anthropologist of sorts. I think that's sort of my nature. And interesting for Charlie is that when he was the person who called it. He's the person who said, I think I'm feeling foggy. Should I go see Gary Small, who is the head of the Semel Institute at UCLA that I had sought a second opinion for my mother from. So he watched me navigate this with my mom. And then when he found out, it was sort of a relief for him. Oh, that's why I'm feel this way. Interestingly, now that I've made the movie and some of my friends have seen it, and friends who haven't seen it but know about it, and now they're feeling their spouses are having issues, and their spouses don't want to find out. They don't want to know. Yeah. And the difference is, like, Charlie, in a way, was very proactive about himself, and it's like, they can do nothing. And then he's just sort of like, okay, like, I'd be mad as hell and pissed, and my reaction would be very different, right? Yeah. But he kind of is mostly an optimistic person, and I think he knows that I'm such a tenacious seeker that I'm going to find something if there is something. But I felt for a long time really frustrated, and then I felt like I was being duped. And this is a big issue for me, because the drug trials that are out there right now, the biggest ones focus on getting rid of amyloid plaque, which is sort of the culprit, so to speak, for many people thought for a long time. We have now come to this point. There's so much debate within the scientific community. There was tau theorists, which are the tangles, and then the amyloid, which is the plaque, and then it's like, there's the cells before this. They don't understand it. They're just getting to the cusp of understanding the brain, because we can't biopsy a brain. It's a really hard thing. But you brought up something that I think is really critical, which is we're afraid of this disease in a way that is different than cancer, which, of course, I grew up afraid of cancer for sure. But we're afraid of this because the sense is that you lose yourself. It's not like, I remember growing up, there was a neighbor of mine who lost her arm to cancer, or, somebody loses their breast, and now we have, thankfully, a lot more therapies and individualized therapies, but we're not talking about somebody losing themselves. Is the soul of a person in the brain or in the heart? I don't know. It's a combination of things. But I think our fear of losing ourselves was so great that this is a disease that was discovered in the 1900s, and we're not very much advanced to the place that we should be, the way that cancer was advanced in the 1980s, and now we're much, much further along. Yeah, sure. But Alzheimer's disease, the cells die. It's like death. It's not like they're multiplying and the bad cells are taking over. It's like we're losing it. And that's a metaphor of losing ourselves. And I think that we live in a society so focused on age, so focused on being young. It's like the portrait of Dorian Gray, like everybody, the culture, it's how do you look younger? How are you? But we ignored the brain, which naturally is going to shrink a little bit. We are going to lose some capacity. And how do we accept our own aging of the brain? Now, Alzheimer's, the difference, and that's what's so hard to delineate, is that it's disease. It's not normal to lose the capacity that Charlie is, which is losing his independence. I don't know that we ever lose the essence, the self. It's interesting, my mom also has Alzheimer's probably. That's the other thing, is you don't get a real diagnosis till a person is dead. But it looks based on what they know, right? So Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. My mom has no short-term memory. She's speaking to me in 3 different languages. She still can speak really well and sing, and seems like sometimes relatively happy. But I've lost her capabilities, and that's really hard to accept, because I feel my mother was the uber version of me. She ran a house, she ran businesses, she ran all her friends' lives, she was the first person to bring soup, she was a community person. And now she's kind of reduced to a child in a lot of ways. And now I have to learn to accept that. But she's beautiful, and her essence is coming through. Now Charlie's progression is harder because it's more frustration, because he's so aware of what's happening to him. When my mother, I took her for a diagnosis, and she did the same neuropsychological test, and she was really angry at me, and didn't want to talk about it, and didn't want to accept it. And in a way, I didn't talk about it because that was not what she wanted. And what was I going to do? Tell her, oh, you have Alzheimer's, that's why you're acting like this? Because there was nothing I could do to fix it. And in her case, she didn't want to know that. And she had other problems going on that she was more focused on pain and other issues that were happening. But with Charlie, his emotional intelligence and awareness is so intact that he's so deeply hurt by things because he feels left out. So it's a very different thing, and I feel in a society it's so complicated because we're so focused on, oh, you look great today, Laura. Oh, I'm sorry you didn't sleep last night, but it doesn't show. Like, it's all about, how do we look? How do we present? And we don't take the time to be, how do you really feel? And I think that is where we're lacking. And I feel like if I can do something to change that conversation, I don't feel people ask me enough how I'm doing. Yeah. Because they sort of see me as oh, she's taking care of it. Great. Yeah. And I'm like, and with COVID, people stopped connecting in the same way. I just want somebody to come to my house and bring a casserole, or just, show up. Yeah. And nowadays, that's harder, and we live in a different kind of society. Well, it depends. Maybe every city's different, but No,
I think it's something universal that is going on. That is, people enclosed in their little worlds, and it's becoming more difficult even to sometimes communicate what's important, because we are so used to talk about very superficial stuff, superficial things, because we don't want others to get to know our life, our business, because we always see the others as strangers or as a danger, you know, and it's becoming more and more frequent. It's very frustrating, like you said, because you miss all the simple things, like someone coming over and say, how are you? Do you want to go for a walk? Right. So that's why actually I also loved your the title that you choose for the movie.
So Charlie's had a project that he did about 7 years ago called, or more, but it's called Walking in LA, but walking the letter N, LA. And he loved to walk the neighborhoods of Los Angeles that were not the tourist obvious place, but more real neighborhoods with real people, and he would take pictures. And so it was a bit of an homage to Walking in LA as well. And that website is still up. And I do feel like the universality of what we're talking about is so important. And the stigma around Alzheimer's is because I feel the people have dropped away from us because they're afraid. It's happened to so many people that they knew, and yet they would never, they don't want to see it in themselves, and it's really hard to navigate.
And Heidi, I would like to ask you, using your end reflection that you put in the documentary, that is with the quote of Emerson. So, about accepting our limitation and finding joy despite the loss we are going through, because we lose the people we know, but also the friends around us when they are. I'm gonna say something that is maybe not so correct, but it's like sometimes when we see people in trouble, or we are afraid that that trouble is gonna affect us. So
Right.
that's why we run away, or get left alone in.
Yes, and I would say we often want to look the other way throughout history.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm hoping to shine a light to look into each other more. Because the imperfection of this, the way that the evolution of this disease is that we're losing a lot of what we can do. But hopefully you can still see who we are. And I think that we all need to learn more empathy and patience of how to accept people into society rather than put them away in a memory care.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's too big and it's too long. Like if I wanted for Charlie, because I couldn't keep taking care of him, and believe me, it is hard, he would be, because of a lack of independence now, he would be in a nursing home. And I'm like, but he's not ready for that. But how do we make society, and that's why we need to have change in public policy, we need to have change for caregivers, we need to have public assistance. It should be part of our government and dynamic and social policy to care for one another. And we need to change that. And in Italy, where you're from, like in Rome, there's a place that is a much more inclusive place for people with memory loss to live together, to have their own community, and not to look at each other like they need help.
Yeah. Because
if you keep, there's a famous place in Holland called Hoogwijk. Maybe I'm not pronouncing it right, but it's it was started outside of Amsterdam, and it's a community where people live with dementia, but they also have their own supermarket and bar, and the person who's working at the supermarket knows that this person must have memory loss, so they help them get through the checkout line. Things like that. And when people come to visit that, the head of the community told me, he asked people, do you know who's the patient, who's the family, and who's the assistant? And nobody can tell the difference.
Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like we need more research, we need to understand the disease, and we need to find cures, but we also need to live with it right now, and then we need to acknowledge that we're all going to die. That's just part of it.
Yes.
So how do we create a more caring environment so that as we can live older, we can live with grace?
Thank you so much, Heidi.
Okay.
Really, it was an amazing talk, and
Thank you.
it's been a pleasure also, being exchanging before meeting.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay.